Good afternoon. We're excited to host today's Generational Wealth webinar. October is Estate Planning Awareness Month, so we thought it was important that we hosted an event that covered this crucial topic. Our experience working with clients over the years, they know estate planning is important, but they tend to procrastinate. Maybe life gets in the way, or they don't want to deal with these difficult end-of-life conversations. They just put it off. And just like most things in life, doing an estate plan from a position of strength, you're probably going to have a better outcome than waiting to the last minute. So today we've invited one of our partners, Vic Rowe of MFS Investments, to lead today's discussion. Vic's going to guide us through the importance of estate planning and also provide some strategies to help protect your legacy. Some of you probably have heard Vic speak at some of our other events. He's one of our favorite partners and tends to be a good luck charm. The last two events Vic spoke at, the market literally went on a 10% rally soon after. And that's a true story. So, Vic, there's no pressure today. We're just expecting at least a 10% rally by year end. You can make that happen.
That's a lot to ask, John. Appreciate it. Well, thank you for that intro, and thanks everyone for your time again today. It's nice to be back, and I hope everyone's enjoying the wonderful fall weather. As John mentioned, we're going to talk about an interesting topic today. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of family wealth planning and, the importance of generational wealth planning. Now, MFS, most of you know, I'm always up there talking about the markets and the economy. We're not an estate planning firm, but we are an investment firm, and we've had 100 years of experience of watching generational wealth. And we put together just a little bit of guideline to understand what is the conversation really about and how do you do it successfully. And I think the idea is that what is a successful wealth transfer? Well, it's probably got a couple elements. The first one is that it's gonna pass the things that you want onto your heirs, right? Not let somebody else get in the way or take some of that wealth. An example would be maybe the IRS, right? Another thing that you probably want is you want to let people understand the intent or your desire for what your wishes are beyond just giving them money, what you hope they do with it, and how they're able to use it to make maybe more generational wealth, going on to grandkids and so on and so forth. And then probably the last one, and the last thing that anyone's ever thinking about when they're thinking about probably generational wealth transfer is obviously obliterating a family or having them fight and cause infighting. Right? That's kind of the worst or the ugliest part, if you will, of family wealth transfer. And so we're going to talk about that today. First, you're going to see the agenda here is laid out. We want to first understand, why do estate plans fail? Like, how is this possible? How can I be leaving somebody something and this become a failure in any which way or capacity? We're going to talk about some of the things that make it a failure. Where they're going to tell you how to set up a nice plan so we don't fail, and design a way to kind of go forward and understand what does it take to do a proper plan. And then probably the hardest part is then communicating the plan. This is where every good plan fails, is in the communication process. So we're just going to walk through a couple of these. And of course, John and I will take your questions at the end. So right off the get-go, right? Paying too much in taxes, right? If you do a wealth transfer and the government gets 40% of your assets, it's probably not top of your list of people you want to contribute to. Then it would be considered somewhat of a failure. You get caught up in probate, or you get caught up in estate taxes, and your heirs are dealing with lawyers and fighting for a year plus. We've all, unfortunately, in my side of the business, have seen this. You basically, if you don't set it up correctly, then the state's going to get involved, depending on which state you're in, and it could be a pretty long, drawn-out process and cause a lot of undue stress on your family. Infighting, I already mentioned. There's a couple of items that we'll go over today that nothing will create more infighting than lack of clarity on exactly what you want or who you want to have something from your estate. And that's an important thing, and we'll talk about that. And then, of course, the last thing most people are thinking about is, if I leave somebody some money, how fast are they going to go through it? Well, realistically speaking, you should probably all know the lottery number. It doesn't matter how much money a lottery winner inherits or gets, they spend it in about 18 months. And you should know the average inheritance, unfortunately, isn't much better than that. People are just either good with money or they're not that good with money. And the amount of money you give them doesn't actually change that fact. And so we'll talk a little bit about maybe a way to help educate. That way it doesn't happen to you and your family. So not having a plan, number one on the list. If you don't have a plan, right, then what are the odds you're going to be able to be successful at doing this? Most people, John mentioned it right off the get-go. Most people say, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it. The last thing I like to think about is me not being on this earth. Okay? So I'm always planning to be here. That's my first key plan. But if you're not thinking about it, if you're not trying to do some of the basics earlier on, then unfortunately, if something does happen, you're leaving behind quite a big mess, and then you won't have a plan. So the first mistake you're going to make is not to have a plan at all. So what are some of the things that you want to put into your plan? So the most basic things are, first is going to be a will. Everybody kind of knows this. Wills are obviously can be drawn up by attorneys. Today, you can go to a website and download it, or you can simply handwrite one and put it in a place there where it could be located. But a will is the first kind of spot that you're going to go to write down some ideas and thoughts on what you want to do with your estate. Then you might get more technical. You might have more needs in your family. You might want to set up a trust. You might want to look towards doing something a little bit more complicated, maybe bring in an attorney. Once again, set up a trust, make sure that it's designed or designated or dispersed in a certain manner. That could be another big part of the plan. So you bring in an estate planning attorney. You don't forget about a POA, durable power of attorney. Something should happen to you that doesn't involve death or a lot of illness. You definitely want to understand who you trust, and you want to put a plan in place for that. That's also part of this idea. And then the other part is, no matter what it is you do, you better tell people what it is you did. If you put a will together and you buried it in your backyard and no one knows how to find it, well, then it just simply doesn't exist. And there are other things that can happen. You can put it into a laptop as an example. A good friend of mine unfortunately passed away many years ago, and I was very close to the family. And one of the most unbelievable things was he did a lot of this good stuff, as he knew to do, as a friend and a colleague of mine, except he didn't expect to pass away as fast as he did. And he didn't give anyone the laptop password. So as you can imagine, all that work was, unfortunately, it was worthless. He didn't give anyone access to the computer. So we're going to talk about that as well. And then, of course, the beneficiaries. Looking back, I know if you're working here with my friend John and company, that there's no question that you know where your beneficiaries are, but there are a lot of different things, life insurance policies, et cetera. We'll get into some of the more famous cases involving that, but you got to make sure that all that is up to speed. Otherwise, then you really don't have a great plan. So putting together the right documents is an important part, right? But now it's not sharing the plan is going to be the next big failure, right? So probably for most of us, it's going to be a spouse or a significant other. That's the first person that we're going to trust. We're going to say, okay, here's what I've got. Here's the will. Here's the trust. Here's who you contact. These are the people. But a lot of times, if there's something that you don't necessarily want to give to your spouse, then you need somebody else that can help you. It's a terribly bad example I'll give you here as I'm sitting too close to my wife here. But the example would be, I have a safe at my house, and in that safe is a number of things. And so one of the people I trust, other than my wife, is a friend of mine. He lives out in California. And so what I did to one day, I said, look, I'm going to send you a picture of us when we were kids, and framed it up nicely. I said, on the back of that picture is the combination to my safe. I said, should something happen to me and my spouse, know that this is where it's located, and you should then, open up this frame, get to the back of it, and have access to everything that's in there. Right. And here are the things I'd like you to do, and here's what I'd like them to give them to. So I did a little thing like that. But you have to have a third person in your plan, because you never know what's going to happen in life. And it could be for different things. You can designate certain people for certain items. I just happen to pick my buddy John, mainly because, obviously he's somebody I trust. And then once again, at a good distance, doesn't have to worry about anything else. So that's how I picked that. But you have to have a third person in communication, because if they don't know where these documents are, if they can't access this stuff as fast as you need it access, then it doesn't almost exist. And so that's the bad part of the planning process. So make sure you share the plan, what you have, where it's located, and how to access it. All right. Failing to update the plan. So you go through the trouble. I am 47 years old. I've gone through the trouble before. I did this when I was a little bit younger. I was about 39 years old when I did it. And so you go through life. Life throws a lot of curveballs at you. Things change. And so if you're not changing your plan as your life is changing, then it's almost like you may not have one at all. And I'll give you some examples. So if you move from, I don't know, let's say for some reason I decided to move from Jersey New Jersey, I should say Virginia to New Jersey. I go from the great state of Virginia, where I live, and I decide to go to New Jersey, where it's very punitive to pass away. Okay, there's a lot of different laws in Jersey. There's a different estate tax planning. If I don't make adjustments in my plan, let's say, for example, it's a trust document, or maybe it's just a simple will, then I have not properly prepared to make these changes, because I could be giving more money to the government than I intended. I could have more consequences for that. What if I go through a divorce, right? And so I have everything set up right now for my spouse. Something should happen. By the time I'm 50, I go through a divorce. That means everything that I've ever done needs to be changed over, or at least I have to try to remember to do that. Otherwise, if I pass away before that, maybe an unintended person receives my benefits. There is a very famous case that happened here in Tyson's Corner. It was litigated out of Tyson's Corner. It made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And here's what happened. Somebody in their young 20s working for the government, right, decides to get married at a young age, right, sets up a few things like their IRA beneficiary as their spouse. They get divorced shortly thereafter. 30 plus years go by. They haven't thought about it in 30 plus years. Children, right, with their new wife, adult children, passes away. One of the biggest assets that they had were two things. One was a life insurance policy that was done when he was a young man, and then one was an IRA. Both had beneficiaries of the original spouse, but he had a will, and he had everything drawn out. He did a very good job of planning. He had everything spelled out to who he wanted to have what and everything, very detailed. Did everything that we were supposed to do, except he failed to change the beneficiaries' names on those original documents that go back over 30 years. And so the question would be, what would win out? His will, or the original people he put on the beneficiaries on those forms for the life insurance policy and for the IRA? Goes all the way to the Supreme Court. You know what they said? The original people on the document will get the money. The ex-spouse, who he hadn't been part of their life in over 30 years, received the assets. Meaning that if we don't go back and check the little things, even though we've gone on and said, hey, I'm going to do the responsible things now, I'm going to go forward. If we don't go back and check the little things, if those boxes aren't exactly filled out correctly, then an unintended person could receive your assets upon your passing. And so that was a very big case. So we made it very clear. Certain forms and documents that you will fill out will be binding. Give you another example. Same forms, right? You put something on your life insurance policy or your IRA to be your first beneficiary. Maybe it's a son, maybe it's a daughter, maybe it's your first son or daughter. Maybe you forgot to update it when you had a second son or daughter. What then? And I go, well, the document's the document. 30 years go by, you pass away, your firstborn, in this case, winds up with the assets. Now, I hope they're a good sibling and they decide to give half to their sibling, but they're not required to. All the assets will go to the first person that they put on the line. And so as you have children, you have to start revisiting this. If you want it to be split evenly, you have to revisit. So these are the little details throughout life. As you have things change in your life, you should say to yourself, what consequences or what things do I have to do now to make sure that everything is intended to go the way I want them to go? So as time goes on, this will be just part of, I guess, living life. So we create a plan, right? We finally have the idea of doing it, but if we don't update it, then it's almost like we didn't do it in the first place. So we have to stay on top of this, unfortunately, as life moves on. All right. So the last one I'll mention for failure is you're not specific enough about your plan. So when you have to be detail-oriented, this is an important thing. People want to know exactly why, who, when, and what they should do in case of inheriting assets or whatnot. You don't want to create infighting. The more vague you are, the more issues you have. I'm leaving so-and-so the house. And that means all the contents in the house or just the house. You just said the house, guess what? Here comes the fight over what's in the house, right? Dishes to pictures, right? All these little things will come in. You have to be extremely detailed in your plan and very specific when you put it together. Otherwise, that will create an undue amount of infighting. So to help you do that, to avoid these mistakes, one of the things we suggest you do is you create a family map. This is just an example of one. The purpose of a family map is really simple. It's who's in your life that you intend or hope you should take care of, or you're trying to take care of. Do you have any elderly parents? Do they have any needs that you're required to help take care of? Write their name up there and say, okay, here are some people that I'm thinking about. We have grandchildren that we want to take care of. Do you have a neighbor, a friend, an aunt, an uncle. These are the people that you have to put in your mind and saying, this first thing I want to put down is who are the people that are most important to me that I need to help in my life should I pass away? How can I do that? Here it is. So you jot everybody down. And then once again, the purpose is just making sure you don't forget anybody, create the document. As time goes on, for example, my grandparents have passed on, right? People may fall off this list as time goes on, and then you'll kind of focus back in your priorities on, okay, that I was going to give to my grandfather. In this case, now I'm going to give that item to somebody else, right? And the idea is that your plan will keep evolving, but your roadmap here or your family map obviously may extend to great-grandchildren, et cetera, but you may make changes over time. But a good plan will start with the good map of understanding who it is and what it is we intend to do. Now, this picture is a symbol of what we'll call the greatest estate planning mistakes of all times. If you want to create infighting in your family, go ahead and leave them a vacation home. So this is seen as the greatest blunder of all times because the emotions tied with it. First, I totally get it, right? I have a lake house, and the first thing I would think of is if I had great memories with my family there, I would love those memories to continue on. And I think about grandkids having memories there and all the good times that we had just continuing on in perpetuity, right? That's a beautiful thing to think about. That's a great symbol for this picture. However, if you have multiple children, and let's say one lives in New York and another lives in California, and maybe one lives local, let's say here in DC, and this house happens to be, I don't know, we'll pick, let's say it's in Bethany Beach, all right? And so it's on a canal down in Bethany Beach, and you decide that you're going to leave it to your 3 children evenly. And the problem is that it's a beautiful idea, and they have families. So the first fighting, let's say, is we want to do scheduled weekends and when my family can use the house. And then someone else says, no, hey, let's just play it by ear. Let's be all loosey-goosey with it. Who cares? Let's not be that drawn out about it. And all of a sudden we show up on the same weekend. Possibly some infighting. What if I want to update the kitchen? Who's responsible for that? My other siblings have to kick in 2/3, right? What if it's a need? What if the house needs a roof? And I disagree. 2/3 agree, but God doesn't need a roof, right? All of a sudden, we're creating all these boundaries and all these issues that happen when people share something, right? In this case, sharing the vacation home. And so nothing will tear a family apart more than something as beautiful as this picture, unfortunately. So if you're going to leave something like this, you might want to put it to trust and leave some money behind and some rules behind it if you're going to do that. Or realistically, most people you'll find is you sell the asset as beautiful as it is, and you distribute that the money in that case to stop the infighting from happening. But people will definitely, unfortunately, throughout time, fight over certain things that are important to them, especially emotional things like a house. Another one, mom's wedding ring, right? Another thing, a lot of infighting about mom's wedding ring. That's a big one, right? Who gets it and why, right? And paintings, certain paintings, heirlooms, stamp collections, anything that was important to you, your kids saw that were important to you, then it becomes important to them. And so certain people are more drawn to it than others. So a couple of different things you can do. I was recently out in Idaho at a friend's beautiful place, and I was talking about their children. And they said, what we decided to do was we did the round robin. And so think of it like a draft for the NFL or whatnot. You take the oldest, sibling, and you say, okay, you get first pick. Give me an item you want and why. Okay. And they pick one. They say, I want, this painting and whatever it is. And you say, okay, great. And they go, next. John, you're up next. What do you get, right? And so they kind of just go back and forth, kind of like a draft style, and they kind of went through some of their major things and that they wanted to leave to their children and let them pick and kind of settled it while they were there and say, okay, this is settled now. Going forward, this is where it's going to go. And so sometimes it works that way. Other reasons, you can certainly create your own reasons, write them down. But what's important is people understand, once again, the details in what you did and why. And I can't stress that enough. So this is a third party, nothing to do with MFS whatsoever, but we found this item. It's called the Family Love Letter. Some of you may have heard of it before. This is probably one of the better resources we found out there in the ether that is worth looking at. Everything from who your attorney is to contact should something happen to you, to your accountants, all that stuff is kind of ability to list that in here. once again, you can put certain items and certain memories that you want to put in here, and why you've chosen to do certain things, things about your history, things that people may not know about you. So it's a lovely kind of idea in a sense that if you want to take the time to purchase it and then once again go through it and fill it out, it will create a lot of clarity for your people that inherit your estate and understanding about you when you pass on and what your intentions were. And I think it's probably one of the nicer of the bunch. So we've talked a little bit about kind of the idea of, all right, mistakes are made, right? Simple mistakes are made. They have unintended consequences. We lose tax money. We fight with the state, right? And the assets don't go that were intended. The idea would be put together a plan. We're going to communicate the plan. We're going to make sure we put in a third person, a trusted person as well. And then finally, we're going to make sure that we're as detailed as we possibly can be, and we understand certain items that we may have to set up differently if we choose to pass them on. So now the next big question is really going to come down to preparing the beneficiaries. So once again, just because you give somebody something doesn't mean they know what to do with it. Okay, so idea is you can leave them 20 million or 20,000. The math is 18 months. It's not personal. It's just people's ability to understand wealth is different over time, and everyone treats money differently. And so you have to prepare people. So there's a number of different ways at which this can occur. And we understand this is not a conversation that people don't want to have. So if you look at the list here, there's a number of things that you'd rather talk to your children about, or the people that are going to inherit your money. And money is right above sex on that list. And so this is not something that people are comfortable talking about. We get it. We understand, right? Think about it. You never want your children to be less. Right? So you're saying, I'll never let them know what I'm going to give them because I want them to have their own life. I want them to have their own goals. I want them to achieve, right? You never want them sitting around waiting for me, right? To pass away, to try to move on. The idea is you want them to be successful. However, their ability to understand money is always different. Life shapes people in different ways. And so I would always say that if you've got someone that you leave something to, create a relationship, right? Create a relationship here. With Cortelli Wealth Management, create a relationship so they can understand, help them do little things. And so some of the little things that you can do is help them open up an IRA as an example, right? Or an account. And then if you want to try to see how they respond to money, you can do some gifting a little bit earlier in life. So maybe you try to gift them $10,000, a year to see kind of how it goes and what they do with the money, and kind of make a determination of, did they save it all? Were they responsible with it? But there are little movements that you can do from your estate along the way that kind of tests out this ability. And then more importantly, like I said, if you create a relationship, for example, here with John, then the idea is that he understands your wishes, he understands what your intentions are, and then he can help kind of push them in the right direction and saying, that's great, that's a great idea. Here's what I think that was more intended, but he ultimately it's their money, but he can kind of shape them and put them in a good direction and try to help them make good decisions. And so it's important to understand that if you just give somebody a lump sum of money that's not good with money, it just won't last, unfortunately, generations. It probably lasts, unfortunately, 18 months. Now, as far as people wanting to have this conversation, you can see that there is a great reluctance here. If we look at just people's interest in talking about family wealth with an investment professional, it's about 26% of people are very extremely or very interested in doing such a thing. Okay, people do not want to talk about generational money. They just don't. They don't want to get involved, and it's a very emotional thing. And they, like I said, they want the best for their children or their heirs, but they don't necessarily want to try to influence that. At the same time, very few people have done it, less than 40%. But the interesting part is the people that benefit the most. In this case, we're looking at Generation Y. People who have had it done had found it extremely helpful. And so the idea is that if you go ahead and you have a conversation, if you want to sit down with the Cortelli Group and say, look, I'd like to bring in my heirs or my grandchildren or whoever it is, and talk about the concepts of inheriting money and wishes and just proper investing and planning for the rest of their life, It may not be as exciting to you because you're the one thinking about giving it away, but the person that hears it may learn an awful lot about it. And I think that's the most important part. It's about educating the next generation, and their ability to handle money and deal with it throughout their lifetime is an important factor. So once again, as simple as it sounds, the game here is, I mentioned this earlier, gifting decisions. Just go think about ways to kind of test bubble out, if you inherit money, see how somebody reacts to it, see what they do with the money, see if you can guide them in a little bit better direction. Opening up an accounts, showing them the way it's done, kind of do by teaching, right? Show them what an IRA is, show them how to open one up, how to manage it, and then consider doing a joint meeting with your financial professional. I also think it's really important. These are people that shouldn't, I don't necessarily meet at the funeral. It's always a nicer introduction when somebody knows who that person is and you can trust them when they call and say, I know exactly who you are, we've met before. And so part of that is also the ability to kind of help the generations through just knowing each other. And then finally, education. Everyone has to understand that people are going to make mistakes. The only way to kind of stop mistakes is understanding other people's mistakes or living them. There are several resources that are out there in the world to help people understand what it is like to inherit something, what it is like to manage assets that you inherit, etc. I suggest once again that you maybe possibly provide these to your heirs as time goes on. Let them read, let them get educated to understand what this means. But where we are today, the beautiful idea and the ability just to give assets or things, more than assets, but memories to other people. It's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing thing to be able to accomplish such a thing over your lifetime. All we got to make sure we do is that we don't make the simple mistakes, right? We do everything we can. We make sure we get all the little details taken care of. We keep those details updated. We stay on top of it. Right? We inform my financial professional. In this case, I'm staring at John. I inform John, let him know every little thing I'm doing to make sure he keeps on top of it for me. Right? We know where we're going. Then, after we do that, we focus in on making sure that the plan is solid. We communicate that plan to the key people that we need to communicate to. It's going to be my spouse. It's going to be a couple of key people in my life that can help me execute things should I not be there to do it. And then once again, I don't want them meeting my financial professional for the first time at my funeral. I prefer to give some introductions if possible at this point in time so things can go a lot smoother during transition. And then the last part is the people that I intend to help, although I don't want to have these conversations with them, I do want to educate. I do want to make sure that they are prepared. So therefore, should I pass away and leave them some assets, that I know that my dreams and hopes for them will be followed, and they won't run out of this money in 18 months. It will be something that will be meaningful to them, and then I'm hoping to be meaningful to the next generation as well. So those are the basics. Those are the broad strokes. So with that, why don't John and I take it up and see if there are any questions on some of the things that we talked about here today.
Thanks, Vic. I think you made sense of this topic. You gave some practical tips that we could act on. We've developed a process called the family phone call. What the family phone call is designed to do is really introduce ourselves to your loved ones, just to make sure everyone in the family is on the same page, so there's no surprises. Do we have any questions, Umaid? I don't think we have any questions. So, Vic, how often should you update your will or your trust?
Once again, mainly on life events, but some people like to do a calendar year as part of a review, and that's up to you. But anytime there's a major event in your life, generally I would say is the time you have to at least revisit it. But if you want to be more processed on an annual basis, just sit down and say, today's, I don't know, pick a day, first day of the year, and say, all right, any changes I got to make to the things that are important to me. And if you do that, you'll have a lot better peace of mind about things in general. I will make the number one question I normally get asked, and I'll just throw it out there. Make sure your bank accounts are set up right. I can't tell you how many times that somebody passes away and even their spouse can't access the bank account. If you don't set this up right, every bank's a little bit different, but make sure if you pass away that your spouse or whoever the person is responsible for you at that point in time has access to the ability, the money that you're going to need to help you at
You have
that
a
point in time.
TOD.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, like a transfer on death, like a beneficiary on all the bank accounts.
Got to have it ready to go. Number one thing people forget, and when people are all of a sudden locked out, you're dealing with the death of a spouse and you're locked out of your finances. It's a nightmare.
Is there a rule of thumb, Vic? People say, will or trust. Is there a real, I mean, of course, if we get to a certain asset size, you definitely want to look at a trust, but is there a rule of thumb when you want to have a trust instead of a will?
Generally, it really comes down to if there's something more complicated you're trying to do. So if I wanted to control, for example, let's say I have children, they are, adults at this time. Let's say they're 23 and whatever, and I want to give them the money at this specific age. Or I want to give them, 50,000 at this age and another 100 when they hit 40 because I think they'll be more responsible, right? All that kind of stuff is going to require trust. Anytime I want to put rules in place, if I want to take that vacation home I mentioned, I want to fund that with a bunch of money, right? Have it invested and then distribute in a certain way to make sure the house had upkeep, right? Anytime I'm overcomplicating it, other than just putting a name down and an asset, I'm probably going to need a better legal document to do it. So, will is the first step. A will can be as simple as you literally write it out. You can staple it, to a document, and that's binding. Wills are simple, right? This is my intentions, but trusts are going to be more complicated, but they are meant to, kind of live forever, or until something is accomplished. So until it's all distributed. So anytime you want to be more pointed or make things a little more complicated, you're going to go to a trust over a will all day.
Okay. Well, thanks, Vic. I
John,
definitely.
we do have a question. It looks
Go
like
ahead.
Dan has raised his hand. I'll allow him to speak. Dan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me, Dan?
You are unmuted, Dan. You can put the question,
In the chat box.
yeah, that might help.
Is it in there?
Any other questions while Dan's typing the question up? What I could do is if I could get the question from Dan and we could speak to you, Vic, offline and get back to Dan.
Sure.
With the answer.
You bet. But like I said, the purpose of this is, whether it's a will or a trust, the key is put a plan together, right, and then communicate it. Personally, unfortunately, everyone's had events in their life. They lose somebody, and each time you wind up getting another education, is a lack of a better term for it, right? You learn about that, and I would say that you learn from these mistakes, but you understand, you understand how to kind of correct them, and then. Remember, everyone always thinks there's going to be more time. There's no better time than now to go ahead and plan and get it done.
Yeah,
and if you just remember to update it, you'll be in good shape.
I think to your point, Vic, is we had a client a few years ago. The parents had an IRA at a local investment firm, and they were each other's beneficiary, but they died within like a month of each other, and they didn't have the kids as contingent beneficiaries. So they had to deal with the state of Maryland for a year, 18 months. Just to get access to that money. So while they're grieving, it was just a real pain for them. So you definitely want to update things. But again, Vic, thanks for your time. And if anyone has questions regarding today's webinar or wants more information on the family phone call, just reach out to anyone on our team and we'll be posting a replay on our website in the next few days. Thanks again for attending. Have a great day.
Be well.